Okay,
Cool.
Demetrius.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. Very good. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So, uh, I guess I started out working in Washington, D.C. on a lot of environmental work
Yeah.
for about 5 or 6 years, and I actually was over in Southeast Asia working on some projects that were nearby new dams that were being constructed. And it was
Hmm.
around that time in like 2016, 2017, where I started to hear about how Bitcoin mining was being done at
Hmm.
like dams in many places.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of my strange entry point. I had heard of Bitcoin prior to that in like
Hmm.
2013 and stuff, but I had never bought in. I had never seen, I didn't see impact in the world enough to get involved. But once I was seeing these dams and thinking about the fact that this is actually creating a demand for this technology is actually increasing the demand for that technology as well, that it
Hmm.
was like, oh wow, this is powerful, like codependent technologies that are both uh, have interesting implications.
Hmm.
And so that was my entry point in 2006, late 2016, and throughout 2017, I started to research more. Launched my own YouTube channel where I just started to review a bunch of cryptocurrency projects because I wasn't sure if I was understanding the stuff right or if I was, missing something. Because to me, it seemed like a lot of projects were all doing the same thing, and I wasn't understanding all of the hype around everything. So I was many times I got corrected, with those videos. When you're going through a project every day or every 2 days, you can only get so much research done. So it was a good learning experience for a few months to run a channel like that.
Hmm.
And then I kind of got burned out from that and decided to just work on one or two projects that I really felt had potential and that I liked the technology, and to help write out documentation around those projects. And that's kind of led me to where I'm at today, where I'm doing a lot of the capacity building and educational work for Gellerita, and through my company Demetrius Consulting here in the United States. So Gellerita are the developers of the Ardor platform, and also the Next platform. So they have some really incredible technology over there that I was impressed by and decided to see how I could contribute to making it more accessible,
Hmm.
since I felt like there just wasn't as much hype around that. So that's been my experience. And as of January, I began as a contributor on the International Telecommunication Union. They have a DLT standardization focus group that's putting together a series of reports on standard taxonomies and like reference architectures for blockchain and DLT. And
Hmm.
so I'm actually on I'm a champion on the working group 1 for the standard taxonomies, and I'm also a contributor on the working group 3 for the reference architecture.
Hmm.
So that's a UN organization that's done stuff like 3G 4G standards, and they're heavily involved in that type of stuff. So they're dipping their toes into the blockchain DLT world and seeing what potential there could be for standardization there, voluntary standardization. And so that's been really cool. I was just in Madrid last month at a face-to-face meeting for that. So it's really cool to be sitting around the table with people from other platforms. We're really a lot of developers at companies that are using platforms that they have found different benefits of, and then trying to abstract away all the hype and what is all this stuff really doing when it comes down to it technologically, what is happening at the end of the day. Because that's really what we need to get to for mainstream adoption is a bit more of a level-headed,
Hmm.
standardized approach where we can all look at projects and kind of call through the nonsense.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So when you say DLT, you mean distributed ledger technology?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
Right. And just in case someone in the audience isn't familiar with the term DLT, and you mentioned also that the UN is working on distributed ledger technology.
So the ITU is actually kind of like a sub-organization of the UN that is
Hmm.
focused on the telecommunications industry.
Okay.
So it's where a kind of collective of major organizations like Huawei and like the Brazilian the Brazilian Development Agency is also
Mhm.
heavily involved. So it's anybody who really has an interest in any aspect of telecoms for their infrastructure or
Mhm.
for their business or whatever. It's kind of an unbiased place to come and actually discuss standardization across the industry. So it's a similar thing to something like, if you're familiar with ISO,
Mhm.
like the International Standards Organization, like that is this is kind of like the body of standards for telecommunications.
Right.
And so they do report then to ISO as well and kind of share information back and forth. So it's not like the UN General Assembly is doing something on it. But yeah, they've got parts of their organization that are exploring the implications. They have a lot of interest in understanding how this stuff can be used for the Sustainable Development Goals,
Mhm.
because and in particular within the climate areas,
Mhm.
there are actually specific sections of the Paris Agreement that call for bottom-up approaches with technology.
Mhm.
And so within some of these groups, I just joined like the Climate Chain Coalition as well, and they are doing a lot of work on trying to figure out what the real use case possibilities are in that arena and how to kind of leverage these international agreements that are calling for technology that has many components that align with blockchain, and
Mhm.
seeing if we can find ways through these standards groups and through other use cases to really bring it all together. And so that's really the direction I'm starting to head in, is to kind of marry my past with the present of understanding the blockchain. And hopefully, it continues to progress in the way it's been going, because it really seems like there's a lot of interest in that arena
Mhm.
around blockchain. And I know they use DLT, distributed ledger technology as the term. The reason they're doing that, just for the audience, is that distributed ledger technology is just a broader word for what we're talking about with blockchain. Blockchain is one implementation. At the end of the day, we're talking about a ledger that's quite literally distributed across various computers, and you can just do that in different ways. And so there are mesh networks, there's the Tangle and things like that different people are exploring different types of technologies to get the same outcome of a distributed ledger, basically. And
Right.
And so blockchain is just what Bitcoin innovated, and that's where kind of things have gone from there. So to me, I see most of it through the lens of blockchain.
Mhm.
But yeah, these broader standards groups, they're trying to be more unbiased and trying to keep it to the terms that are as generic and tech focused as possible, so that they're not like pointing to one implementation and standardizing the whole world around that. Since
Mhm.
I mean, it's an entirely new industry. We're not ready for that yet.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, for me, the way that I kind of view this, instead of the term DLT, is I view it as a conflict-free replicated data type. Right.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get general audiences to understand, at least, I mean, when it comes down to it, yeah, it is that, though. That's a fair way of explaining things.
So for me, I think the deep kind of philosophical root of this technology and why I think it's so disruptive is that it allows millions of computers, a fault tolerant network with no single point of failure,
Yeah.
to share independently and collectively a consistent view of history, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what this technology really enables. It enables basically a decentralized, censorship resistant, consistent view of the past, right? What happened before. So for now, the first implementation, or the first mainstream super popular implementation of this, was Bitcoin, which was basically a consistent view of transaction history, right? And that's very useful and very disruptive. But I think that the censorship resistant capabilities of this is something that people don't really appreciate as much as they should.
Granted, we have had that called into question with actual events like, Ethereum back in the day, and splitting off to give a handful of people their funds back from a hack, and that resulted in the network being forked. And I know it was whether it was ill-conceived or whatever it was, we just saw CZ Binance joking about doing a rollback when there was the hack on Binance the other day, and so we still see these types of things that make consumers and mainstream businesses, I think, still hesitant to buy that entire message, because you see these big people in the space. I mean, Vitalik Buterin's everywhere, and he's the unicorn boy, but at the end of the day, this technology has been rolled back before, and we don't know moving forward whether everything is whether all networks are as decentralized as we think they are, and whether they're as immutable as we think they are. I think it's a question that has to be, we can't just assume that we're at that point yet. That's the intention of the technology, but I don't know if we're actually...
Well, now hang on, because I mean, it is a fair point that you're making that Ethereum was rolled back once.
Right.
But that is, we can't necessarily generalize that statement to the whole industry. I mean, Bitcoin has not been rolled back ever.
No, it has not.
So, I mean, there are different communities, and there are different consistency and consensus mechanisms that can be deployed, which make some ostensibly decentralized systems with a centralized development community more or less censorship resistant.
Yeah.
And there are other communities that have proven themselves to be better arbiters of this technology. So, but, and on the other hand, I mean, also even with the Ethereum hack, I mean, they're not changing the history. They're changing the outcome, right? We still know what happened.
Yeah, because we were here. Yeah.
We know what happened. It was hacked. And then they changed the outcome, but we still have the view of history.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, it is still a ledger that is. Yeah, I mean, is the whole point is to not be able to be changed easily. But I'm someone who has concerns just around proof of work, period. And so I don't even want to get into all of that though, because then I've got all the haters come out because of that kind of stuff.
No, but I mean, the haters are good. The haters are good. I mean, let's if they have a reasonable point, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's that we think about immutability in this context, and sure, I refer to these hacks and things like that, but take it to a more extreme level with proof of work, where I understand we have, sure, with Bitcoin, it's, again, maybe not the best example, but it still arguably could be, where the hash rate and the number of people participating in the network is still relatively small in the world, and it wouldn't take a whole lot for a couple, for one government agency or a few to have put together a facility with powerful mining equipment that we haven't seen on the market yet, and flip the switch, and suddenly that we've got a whole new powerhouse contributing to Bitcoin from the outside. That's, not just this decentralized community. And so to me, I just don't fully understand how long-term we actually protect against that once Bitcoin is worth enough that a government would consider it worthwhile to do such a thing. Because yeah, to me, it's so small right now. The idea that we can truly keep this, I don't know, keep this as decentralized as it may be now. I see it moving forward as probably getting more centralized, unless we see some kind of way of preventing that. I mean, I don't follow the proof of work technology too much, because I've for a long time have not seen how it can survive an attack like that long term. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to the ideas of why it's not susceptible to that, because I hear a lot around, because I work on a lot of proof of stake projects, and I hear a lot of people who are maximalists on proof of work who barely even look into it and just wag their finger and say nope, that's not good enough, it's not secure. And I don't see how they answer that question on their own side. It feels hypocritical. So,
there's proof of stake, which is kind of what I think the biggest player in the altcoin space that's trying to deploy proof of stake right now is Ethereum. And
trying.
I wish them well. I mean, their white paper has been vetted, and it's supposedly implementable. So they're implementing sharding, which is, trying to solve the scalability issue, which is basically just side chains, which is fine, whatever.
Yeah.
If it works, if it solves the problem in a fault tolerant way, I think it's great.
Yeah.
If it works, it's great. So apparently, according to their white paper, it will work, and it's in sort of alpha rollout right now.
Right.
So I hope it does work. I hope it does work. In principle, I mean, the white paper works. That's what they say.
I mean, everybody's white paper works. They've got thousands of those in this industry, and several of them have been around for years, and we still don't see them on mainnet. So I don't put too much credence in white papers.
No, neither do I. But there are things like Mimblewimble also that have been implemented.
Right.
And there's different
there's improvements occurring for sure. I mean, it's evolving.
I'm optimistic generally
around the Ethereum platform specifically, or the industry.
I have to say, I'm kind of going down the directed acyclic graph rabbit hole right now, personally.
Okay, the DAG. All right.
The DAG I think is cool.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, especially in the Bitcoin Cash community, are fucking shitting all over Lightning Network.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Bitcoin Cash guys, they hate Lightning because it makes a bigger block size irrelevant. And they hate it. I think, hey, if Lightning Network, again, if it solves the problem, but it's inconvenient and you always have to have a live node, and you have to have money in a hot wallet, and there's definitely some barriers to entry with Lightning Network. But again, if after you do all that work, you can do unlimited microtransactions, as many as you want per second, that's cool if that works. And it does work. It's live. It's not necessarily battle tested, but it works in principle.
Right.
So, I mean, I look at the whole industry as, everybody's working on something that could end up being a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Lightning Network might not solve all problems, but it could have some interesting deployments.
Yes. And here's the thing though, is like that I really strongly agree with that point, that all of these different projects are working on different pieces that will probably all play into whatever the solution that works is, whatever that looks like, whether it's one of these that becomes an amalgamation of all of them, or whether it's another project that comes out of nowhere and just implements it all at once, or whatever it is. And what's so frustrating to me is, I was at, for example, Synchronize last month when the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance or Ethereum Foundation or whatever is announcing their token taxonomy initiative with Microsoft, all right? Meanwhile, I'm over at the ITU with DLT standardization, and we have nobody there to even submit the Ethereum network's architecture. They're not even trying to participate in this like broader conversation at all. And then they come out with like their own standards group for like them, with their partners, but like for them, for their protocol, and that's it. And to me, it's too early for projects and protocols to be doing that.
Hang on though. to be fair, is it just,
I mean,
the other side of that coin? I mean, is it completely reasonable to expect crypto anarchists to be super interested in working with the UN?
They're working with Microsoft and cloud services. I mean, you're putting Ethereum on the cloud and saying, here are private implementations on the cloud of Ethereum, and this sounds so great, and you're using that for your marketing. So I don't think they care that much.
Okay,
I think
so these people are inconsistent.
Yeah.
We have some inconsistent crypto anarchists who don't currently.
They're really self-interested. That's what it is. They're anarchists to an end of self-interest. And that to me is why it frustrates me that the industry gives a spotlight to people working on really nonsense internal standards like that, when really they should be contributing to these broader groups that are voluntary, that are free to be a part of, They don't need to put up millions of dollars to start up some of their own token taxonomy initiative. There's literally a taxonomy working group already that exists at the ITU, that exists at ISO TC307, working on standards at ISO. Like, there are broad organizations like this, and those aren't just like individual governments. These are people anywhere that can voluntarily be a part of these. If you're if you consider yourself even remotely competent with the subject matter, so you contribute and you discuss with everybody else, and maybe your ideas get included, maybe they don't, but it's an actual collaborative environment. And I'm concerned by the lack of these leading platforms participating in these conversations that really are collaborative. They're really just trying to like slam the door shut on anybody else's innovation and say, well, we've got it covered already. And I'm seeing a lot, and that's to me, that's just disappointing, because it limits this potential for innovation.
I do agree with you. I mean, like, I looked at Swarm, which is their IPFS kind of competitor.
Right.
And I wonder, like, had they just put all their Swarm developers on IPFS.
Yeah. If you're really about open source code, you're really about having it be inclusive and really about all this stuff, then
like, why duplicate the work?
Exactly. So that's what I mean. They don't care about actually being open, like this whole decentralized thing. They just want it to be theirs. And that's what is concerning, is this industry not questioning more of that and pushing them to be more collaborative. And some conferences, you get the vibe of Ethereum's won the race already. And then I was refreshed to hear, even at Fluidity on Thursday this week, that even though it was a mostly Ethereum event, many people on stage were saying that they believe within the next 5 years, there's only a 50%. I mean, sure, it's an easy answer, but they aren't so confident that Ethereum will be leading the tokenization race in 5 years, even at an event that was mostly Ethereum. So it was kind of interesting to me to see, what are these subgroups? Where is the bubble not popped yet of people thinking this is it, and people realizing, oh, maybe we've been disillusioned by certain protocols, and maybe we should be looking for alternatives that are looking to be more collaborative and inclusive.
No, but look, I mean, at this stage, I don't really believe that there will be the one blockchain that rules them all in 5 or 10 years. I think right now, obviously Ethereum, with their capitalization that they currently have, I mean, it's clear that they're going to have some market share in 10 years.
Absolutely.
Right? They're the least likely to go to zero, right? Of all the cryptocurrencies that exist right now, which ones are the least likely to go to the zero in 10 years? I would say Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't necessarily want any one crypto or DLT or CRDT organization to have 100% market share. I don't think that's, as a crypto anarchist, I don't see that as being advantageous. Right. But I do take your point. You seem to advocate for a more communitarian approach to crypto anarchism, which I think is fine, because a lot of people view that as kind of an oxymoron.
I'm just going to clarify though. I don't identify as a crypto anarchist.
You don't?
No.
Why not?
I don't believe that's what it's about. I believe it's about better data integrity and better information quality, but otherwise I don't see it as the means for anarchy. That's not my end goal. I still believe that there's a role for social services in society. I still believe that I don't believe that
well, so do I believe in all those things as well.
And it's tough within the space, because you take on a label like crypto anarchist, and there are people who really believe that, taxation is theft and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I frankly don't believe that at all.
Right.
And so I just, to me, I can't associate with that label, because even if there are aspects that could make sense, it's not really the vision I have. I don't think.
Well, I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand the term anarchist as being without rules, but actually it means without rulers.
Right, but there are, because that's the thing, is that, like, I think it's disillusioning people to believe that we can write an unbiased software program that can govern things well enough. Humans will never be replaced to that level.
I think they will. I'm
and
100%. I'm
I think
100%
they could be, but it will be like a fascist society, and
No,
that's my concern. Is that
I don't
it'll be
believe that either.
by a small segment of society that don't understand the problems. I see a lot of people, even yesterday, a big article about a bunch of U.S.-based crypto organizations, Tezos, Zero Cash Foundation, Cosmos. All these recent these projects, they all come together about trying to go and solve Venezuela's problems for them on a task force to understand what needs to happen to replace the bolivar. Meanwhile, none of the information that they've put out identified how the situation got to that point, why the country's in its current situation, or what a real solution is. They're just seeing an opportunity to assert themselves, and really it's dangerous to me, and it's something where it could have a very big impact on their social services if everybody were to just start to go out and it's something where I don't think it's responsible for myself to identify with people that are approaching delicate international situations with that.
Well, I don't think you have to identify with them at all. Those are not necessarily. I mean, look, the term crypto anarchist does not necessarily mean libertarian, nor does it necessarily mean socialist. But it can be either, and it can be both, right? Fundamentally, my only question is, I mean, I believe in providing free healthcare and free educational services and social services as well. I just do not believe that having corporate interests, locking down the representatives with money is the best way forward, right? I don't observe, even in Canada where I live, that a multi-party democracy with we have about 4 parties that poll above 10%, and we are constantly run by the largest minority. Never, like in every election, we end up with a party that wins 35, maybe 40% of the popular vote, and they end up with 60% of the seats in our House of Commons, right? So, and these people are not our best and brightest. Just to be clear.
I understand. I just don't believe that the software can be dynamic enough to deal with the problems humanity will face in the next 30 to 50 years. I believe we're headed towards again, I worked in environment before, and I've been out and around the world, the islands in Indonesia and Cambodia and Ghana and South Africa, and I've seen how things are deteriorating. And I strongly believe it is hubris for humans to think we are at the point where we are ready to automate governance like that. We're going to be facing problems in the next 30 years that we have never had to deal with. And I believe there is a significant amount of danger in automating too many processes and giving away too much power to computers in that process. I'm very much an advocate of blockchain, so I don't mean to be coming across as like negative. I know I was like attacking proof of work earlier, and I'm questioning this now, but I'm just saying that I like to temper the
I take the exact opposite view that you do. I think it's hubris for humans not to automate governance.
I guess
right. I think it's
that's
hubris.
Scary.
I think this idea that the non-best and brightest that want to work for $400,000 a year instead of doing what Jeff Bezos does, right? Like
which is terrible.
I'm not debating that, right? But basically, that we cannot observe that any members of the Congress or the Senate or the president ever are the best possible.
And you're never going to have software that can do the best possible thing. It's always going to have a problem. It's always going to have design flaws or biases built into it. There's just tons of literature that shows how incredibly difficult it is to make code that doesn't have your own biases coded into it. And especially when these protocols are being built by, frankly, in many cases, it's like a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds who don't have that much life experience, who haven't had to go through much of a struggle or experience half the problems they think they're solving, nor have they worked on those problems in any professional context,
Mm-hmm.
where they're even prepared to offer a solution for them. And again, I think it's dangerous for us to allow that to be how our governance is designed moving forward. I see blockchain as a tool for data integrity, and human governance must remain. I will firmly.
I take the opposite view that
I know.
what we want ultimately is to have the desired outcomes, right? Like we want life
Of who?
of, for example, the UN Happiness Index, for example, right? So longest life expectancy, perception of corruption in government, freedom of choice, all of these multivariate indices that can be measured, right? And then we want to say, okay, optimize for all of those. And then
It's dangerous.
What a genetic algorithm framework or you know,
this is scary. This is like, for me, this harkens back to like real hardcore, like 20th century, this sounds like fascism to me moving forward.
It sounds like fascism to enhance happiness index?
To think that we can find, like, all of these data points, again, they're all collected in various ways and things change over time. And what determines happiness is dynamic. A new technology being introduced can impact how people experience happiness. For example, social media, how it influences moods and things like that. There are all types of technologies that have impacts on society and can change and alter the human state in ways where our data collection methods don't necessarily all account for this over time. So you can take a snapshot now and make an algorithm that says, yes, optimize it based on conditions now. But I just think it's very dangerous to think that we're going to be able to keep it dynamic enough.
The conditions can always be dynamic, right? There are general things. Like, for example,
we can only account for the known unknowns. There's unknown unknowns that we'll never know, and I think it's very dangerous.
There's not unknown unknowns about child mortality. There's not. There are zero unknowns about child mortality.
Okay.
Child mortality at its lowest possible rate is better than child mortality at its highest possible rate.
Right, but the means of accomplishing it are important. It can be fascism. Just because you're getting the desired outcome doesn't mean you're doing it in a way that's fair to people.
If less babies are dying, that's clearly not fascism. That can't possibly be fascism. If less babies are dying, that's the opposite.
So,
more babies
do you define, that's the thing though, you then go to the societal level. You have people who then define babies as, you know, the moment that they're conceived in the woman. And so therefore you have to force all of these people to turn, if this is how it's decided and that's how it's defined by the code, then you're forcing a bunch of people to term that are not ready. But that's maximizing babies being born. So,
and yet the consensus on the pro-choice position is always, no, even if you ask the question in the best pro-life framing, right, you still get a 70% compliance with the pro-choice position in America, which is an incredibly conservative country. So if the consensus of the populace is 71% pro-choice, then a baby has been born already, right? We can agree that using decentralized censorship-resistant systems to arrive at a social consensus where everybody has the same voice rather than some politician, everybody has
don't all have the same voice. That's the lie of blockchain.
They do. But, well, if everybody agrees that a baby has been born and that less babies dying is good.
So now the baby's born with a critical disability of some kind, and at age 3 has the choice of having some crazy thing done to itself or passing away in a way that they find respectful to themselves. Again, we have to have society designed in a way that we're not forcing people through conditions that they do not want. And I don't think we can possibly think of every possible outcome and calculate the way that of all the choices that would need to be available to people in all of those situations. And if you're just taking data and saying maximize life expectancy, maximize life, maximize this, maximize that, you're literally taking the humanity out of everything.
If basically
and it's terrifying to me to propose such a thing.
What you're saying instead is maximize the positive feedback that you're getting from the user. if the user's happy, right? If every user has their own AI and every user is happy with their AI, that's great. What's the issue?
I just, I'm not going to engage on that. I'm not,
No,
yeah.
I'm trying to understand, like, because your position seems to be that we must
Your
have.
own AI, it's a different thing, okay? So having a
I'm trying
client
to
on your
understand how
phone.
this is worse than having someone who drops bombs on poor people because of corporate interests. Like, how is this, in your view, potentially worse than what we currently have? Like,
The
would it
thing
be
to me is that
perfect? I don't
it's
know
that
if
it's
it would be
not better.
perfect.
That's the problem, is that it's not actually better for governance. So it is good for data. It's better for like data integrity for sure. Like we can definitely agree that it's immutable data and it's stored in better places and all of that. Excellent. We agree on the technology having value. But to take it to the next level and say it can then replace human governance, it's hubris, man. It's just, humanity can't possibly conceive all the problems, all the potential outcomes, and code it.
I don't. But again,
And
I don't.
an AI is something like having Siri that I can ask questions to and say, hey, can you make an appointment, call my doctor, do this, or hey, do whatever I need. That's great, but that's a different thing than taking broader governance to that level. It doesn't allow choice, because if you're unsatisfied with the services, what alternative then do you have other than that AI? If you're not happy with it.
That's exactly my point. That's exactly correct. That's my only point. There's the rub. It's exactly that. I'm not some kind of revolutionary saying that we need to burn down the government. I'm simply saying, why don't we try competing with it? Why do we recognize its ultimate authority? Why do we
I
say, hey, the government has the right to be my daddy and tell me what chemicals I'm allowed to put in my body? Why do we give the government this power?
Because you can harm other members of society depending on what you do. Like, we live as a collective society, and it's not all about the individual.
I agree. I
And
fully agree.
so we need government in order for us to be able to coordinate as humans. Otherwise, we're all going to have our own vision, our own AI reinforcing our own perceived realities, our own biases, and we're going to get to a point where the world is just so divided and disillusioned by their own beliefs, and that people don't know how to work together anymore. And it's the social engineering aspect of that is terrifying to me. And it really destroys, it takes away the humanity of interaction and any level of coming to common
Well, you're
understanding.
making a lot of presuppositions. I don't understand why we have to remove humanity from the system. Why can't we include humanity in the system? I mean, like, is it your view then that the current representative governance system that was invented centuries ago is optimal? Is that
Of
your,
course, nothing's optimal. I mean,
well,
nothing's ever, we can try and replace it. And again, my point is,
not
I don't see
replace it, compete with it.
compete with it. Again, I see it as a tool to hold it more accountable.
Right.
I
I
see it as a
agree.
tool to, so whether that means it's competing with it, I don't know, but I see it as a tool to help hold governments more accountable. Yes.
Right. And I see it as a tool to say, why should there only be one government? What if I can make a better healthcare system?
I disagree.
Why?
Like, then contribute to that system. Why do you have to do it yourself? Why can't you go and participate in society then?
Why can't I'm doing just that? Like, for example, I'll give you an example of what I mean.
Right.
What if I said, okay, well, I'm going to recruit some doctors to do basically video consultations like you and I are doing right now. Imagine if you were a doctor and I was sick and I
Right.
was talking to you and you were saying, okay, well, then you need to go to the hospital and ask for these tests, right? So they just did a bunch of frontline work for free by video, right? And they've eased the burden of the incumbent system, because now I can just go right there and say, this is what my doctor said was
How
happening.
are you paying those doctors?
What if you have a cryptocurrency with a VAT on it of 10%, for example, and on every transaction there's a VAT, no
I
matter
think
what.
it's absurd, and you can just do better working. Yeah, I don't think blockchain will solve those problems at all.
I don't, but I see that as limited thinking. I mean, why? Why is that? Why is it sacrilegious to say that, you know, like the incumbent healthcare system that puts hundreds of billions of dollars, like the CEO of Aetna just got a $500 million bonus. Your country pays twice as much as everyone else
Yeah, I know. That's the
because
problem.
your government is corrupt.
Yeah, and so people
So,
need to actually participate in that process. I believe that allowing a small, all right, the problem you're basically describing is that we have a small minority of people that don't represent all of society making the decisions for you, right? 35% got elected of your in Canada, but they get 60% of the seats.
mhm,
So we've got like 0.000%, 0.02% of people who know how to code these types of algorithms.
mhm.
And
Well, the
they're not
algorithms code
talking to
themselves.
everybody else. They're taking data, but they're not necessarily going and understanding how all of that data was collected, the biases within the data that they're using to base their decisions off of. They're not
Mhm.
necessarily going to that level on all of that stuff. And then they're making algorithms that automate processes that determine life and death. And that's not what I envision blockchain being used for, because that takes the humanity out of the process. You're
Well,
giving
I
a
just
small number of people the ability to write code and software that determines the outcomes for everybody else. And you literally just said that that was your problem with representative government.
Well, I take a pragmatic view. You know, it's kind of like the same issue with driverless cars. When we can demonstrate statistically that the driverless cars are safer than the human-driven cars, then it becomes hubris to insist that humans must drive cars, right? If I can
If
show
it
you,
ever happens, yeah.
if
If this whole automated car thing ever happens, which
well, it's definitely happening. It's getting better, and it's gonna get there.
Mhm.
It's just a question of, you know, if we can show a lower incidence of accidents per 100,000 miles driven, and it's getting very, very low, right? When we get to the point where the human never has to take over and the cars have less accidents and 10 times less,
Okay.
then at that point, like, I take the pragmatic view. What works better?
Okay, for what for who though is my question that I keep getting to,
For
because
less fatalities. It's
no,
absurd
no,
to say
stop,
that less
stop, please let me finish.
fatalities.
So like driverless cars right now, there's just a study that actually came out in the last month that
Mhm.
found that driverless cars are actually more likely to hit black people because they didn't properly account for what black people look like at night. So driverless cars were built with algorithms that don't properly identify different skin tones in different lighting environments.
Mhm.
That is bias by not properly collecting data and thinking through the biases of your own data, which maximizes life for a certain subsection of society
But
based
wait,
on
now
the
hang
data you
on, because
have.
no, because once that accident happens, there's a feedback mechanism. The user reports, hey, there was an accident. Here's the video of the accident, and the training data improves, right? Like, that bias doesn't remain forever. An accident is an accident. If the number of fatalities goes down, and we all agree that all humans being collided with would be bad, right? There's no bias there. That's
Of
pretty
course.
objective. That's not a subjective thing. There are some objective indicators in the world that we can use, right? There is some objectivity that we can rely on. Otherwise, this would just be, life would be impossible if there was zero objectivity. So where there is objectivity, we can improve the training data. And when the AI is statistically, provably, demonstrably 10 times better than the human one, then why would we use the human one? If the AI politician is demonstrably 10 times more popular, right, by votes, like, let's say you had an AI running for president and the AI got 10 times more votes than anyone else. If you had one AI running against Donald Trump and 99% of voters showed up to vote for the AI, what's the problem then? If the humans are in agreement, if everything's consensual, then what is the issue? And why would you then be opposed to what 99% of your fellow citizens support?
I just think you're out of touch with reality on that front. I'm not even going to address that.
If 99% of people agreed with me, I would be crazy?
With you, but they don't. Nobody wants AI as president.
Not yet.
But like you're just throwing like it's a dream world that doesn't exist. Like people don't want that. The moment anybody realized that's what's happening, I believe you would see social unrest. If people realized they were being governed by robots to that level, you already have people who are upset and unions upset by factories adding in little bits of automation processes. You start to say that we're going to start putting governance in the hands of robots, you're going to have people in the streets, man. You're not going to have 99% of people at the polls voting for it, unless they don't know what they're voting for. And that's what I don't want to allow to happen, is an industry to progress so quickly that people don't know what's happening.
I think that people would also take a pragmatic view. If we agree that the driverless car is safer than the human car, right? If that happens, and it's an if, I agree, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
If the technology gets there, where we can show statistically the driverless car makes better decisions, always. If that's if we can see the data together and say, look, the driverless car is just better.
Yeah.
Right? If it gets
there could be aspects of society where we see automation occur where that is useful. But again, I think certain services like a car or something like that, if that happens, which again, I have my extreme doubts around driverless cars, but if that happens, then I say, great, I'm glad the technology evolved, but I don't believe that means that I should have my whole government on like automated like that, because there will never be a way for us to have that same crisp, clear data that shows they're not being, biased against this minority or that group or whatever. Like, we're never going to be able to have the proper oversight of something like that. It's too much power to machines, and it's really not even.
The issue is the same.
Taking it to a different level.
Too much power to machines, to me, is the same fundamentally as too much power to humans, right?
No.
Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is almost invariable in human history, right? Giving absolute power to humans always causes fun.
All right, I'm sorry, but I have other things I actually need to do today. So I really appreciate the podcast and everything, but I think I'm going to have to go.
Okay. Have a nice day.